Coming up on today's Locked On Senators, we are now another day, hour, minute closer to finding out who the next owner will be for the Ottawa Senators.
And while we wait, we have a great SensCentral citizen today. It's the founder of one of our sponsors, Owl & Co. Grooming. It's Chris Sinclair.
All that and more on today's edition of the Locked On Senators podcast. It's your team every day.
Your Locked On Senators, your daily podcast on the Ottawa Senators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
I'm Jake Sanderson, and you're listening to Locked On Senators podcast.
I'm Tim Stützle, and you're listening to the Locked On Senators podcast.
Welcome inside episode 805 of the Locked On Senators podcast. I'm Ross Levitan on the outskirts of enemy territory in Winnipeg, Manitoba, alongside Brandon Pillar up in the Blue Mountains. Please like and subscribe wherever you download your podcast. We're also available on YouTube where you can leave a comment below today's comment. We want to know who you think will break the Senators' sail. Is it going to be Bruce Garriock? Is it going to be Ian Mendez? Will it come straight from the source, from the Ottawa Senators, or someone else? Today is Wednesday, May 24th, and Pilsy, how are you handicapping this very exciting race?
Well, I mean, we got to say off the top, our guy, Lalim's Martian, the Martian, has already put his scoop out there for everyone on Twitter, saying that Michael Andlauer will be the upcoming owner of the Ottawa Senators. So if that happens, of course, we will credit Martian on that. But you know what? I'll go with our guy, Bruce. He's had his finger on the pulse of this story for quite a while, and I think that'd be a good one for him to get. But ultimately, I don't care who breaks the news, Ross. It could Shaquille O'Neal could tweet out the new owners of the Ottawa Senators, and I would be fine because I'm just about ready to wrap this up. If I have to see another celebrity being added to another bid, I think I might just go crazy.
I would love for Shaquille O'Neal to break. I think it's more likely Charles Barkley. He's the hockey fan.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah,
on the TNT panel, but that would be an all-time kind of final boss for what we've seen in the whole sale situation. Now let's quickly touch on the latest from the sale. Yesterday, Ian Mendez had a great article just kind of depicting and what I think may have happened. And we obviously trust our boy Martian. The streets have never been wrong before. However, I think that at that time very well could have been. But then what if the Kimmel group or the Steve's group,
Steve
or name Steve A, not Steven A, just Steve A. I think that there might have been a pretty important counteroffer after that. I think it's a two-horse race right now. However, Bruce Garriock this morning saying, I believe the sale of the Sens is a three-horse race between Steve Apostolopoulos,
boom,
Jeffrey and Michael Kimmel, and Michael Andlauer. He goes on to say he's told the Nico Sparks group is still trying to raise funds, and it's getting a little late in the game for that. Well, his article says that the game's gone into overtime, which I kind of catchy headline and couldn't be more true as we've now reached 201 days since the Senators officially went for sale. But from what we're hearing, and new source alert actually, so shout out to the sources out there, ears to the street, we should know Thursday or Friday at latest. So if it goes into next weekend, Pilsy, I'm putting the Roger Nielsen white flag up on my hockey stick. I'm raising the towel. I'm saying, man, we can't keep going through this day after day, week after week.
Especially, Ross, like, you know, the last couple weeks, it's been, okay, it's coming soon, whatever. But we're approaching the draft kind of quickly here. And if this team doesn't have a new owner by the draft, there are some big decisions. I know maybe that sounds weird since the Ottawa Senators won't be picking till the fourth round, but DeBrincat decisions, goalie decisions, prospects moving in or out come draft day. There's some big decisions that are being just pushed across the table and left for later that need to be dealt with here on the hockey side of things. So it'd be nice to wrap this up sooner rather than later.
It's been 9 days since the binding bids were submitted. So obviously there's a bidding war going on. There has to be, otherwise a decision would have been reached by now. And as we've been saying through this whole process, when a decision is reached, we'll be going live as soon as humanly possible here on Locked On Senators. But we still have plenty of great conversation for you. In the meantime, if you missed it, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, we did our prospect roundup, basically covered every prospect within the Ottawa Senators organization, 8 honorable mentions, plus our top 10 list. We've put that list out on Twitter at SensCentral, on Instagram, lockedon.senators. Go tell us how wrong we are. Go tell us who your favorite prospect is in the Ottawa Senators system. But today we're going to switch gears back to our favorite segment, Pilsy. Yes. It's been far too long. We had Jordy on the show a few weeks ago, but we have to get into a more consistent rhythm, especially now that it's the offseason, of getting our SensCentral citizens back in the mix.
Yeah, it's so much fun doing the citizens because, you get a taste of where this fan base is at from people of different opinions. And I always love hearing the stories of how people became Sens fans because it's usually a little more interesting than just, I was born here. There's always some sort of memory or a person in their family or friend group that got them attached, or we've had a lot of video game attachments to people becoming Sens fans too. So it's always fun to hear from the community.
I feel like the more overseas citizens that we have are the ones who are like, I just started playing this video game and the Sens logo was so cool in the 1990s with the 2D logo that's back. So absolutely love to see this. So why don't we get to our conversation with Chris Sinclair, and at the end we get into a fun or very informative part where it's like, how did Owl & Co start, which is a great sponsor of ours here on Locked On Senators. You're listening to Locked On Sens. Next, we've got the SensCentral Citizen.
Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at eBay Motors. Guys, for a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay's guaranteed fit, you can be sure every part fits just right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage, and you're going to look for that green check mark to know that your part will fit. Or you get your money back. It's simple, because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. So get the right parts, get the right fit, and get the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Check out eBay Motors today.
Today's episode is also brought to you by my happy place. It's Shawarma Palace. Any of their 7 locations are my happy place, and there's actually 8 locations because they can come wherever you are thanks to Uber Eats, because Shawarma Palace is available on Uber Eats. So if you want to just stay home, get fed very well, and pretty much for the whole family, if you get the platter over at Shawarma Palace, you'll be locked in and ready to go and fueled up too, because it's all the freshest ingredients. They've been Ottawa's #1 spot for shawarma since 1997. Ottawa, world renowned when it comes to shawarma. And when you go to the best spot in the world for shawarma, you want to take it a step further and only have the best of the best. So go to Shawarma Palace and experience a life-changing meal, because I know it. It's the first place I go every time I go home to Ottawa. The days going home from Lisgar in high school, getting off the 7 on OC Transpo right at Rideau and Augusta, walking over, grabbing my shawarma, and away we go. Always the best way to fuel up. So go to Shawarma Palace today. Eat like a royal. Sens game days taste better with Shawarma Palace. You already know that. But also in the summer, stay light, stay on your feet, and go have a nice big meal at Shawarma Palace. All right, let's get to this week's SensCentral Citizen. Here is Chris Sinclair. All right, we now welcome on this week's SensCentral Citizen. It's Chris Sinclair. Now, you know Chris's name because he is the man behind Owl & Co. Grooming, which you know is a great sponsor of Locked On Senators. Chris is also a huge Sens fan. Chris, welcome to Locked On Senators. I feel like this is long overdue.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah. Thanks, boys. Really excited to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we're fired up. It's SensCentral Citizen season now that it's pretty much off season here as the playoffs are dwindling down. And you've been a guy we had on the list for a while. So I'll start it off like we start off every citizen. When and how did you become a fan of the Ottawa Senators?
Yeah, I've always loved this question. It's great to hear from the community, like, how did you start and like what was the passion, like what got you into the Senators? So I always love this question. And for me, I grew up just outside of Ottawa. Shout out Lanark, Ontario. Most people have never seen that on a map or anything like that. Pretty small town.
Never heard of it.
Heard of it?
No, never heard of it.
Yeah, that's fair. There's 800 people, so I don't doubt it. But I remember growing up, my mom actually had a subscription to the Ottawa Sun and the Ottawa Citizen, where they'd actually hand deliver it to your place, it's crazy to think of now. And fortunately enough, my mom never really liked the sports section, so that gave me an opportunity to look in the sports section. And I was that guy who would rip out if there was an Ottawa Senators player bio or stats or game highlights or anything like that. I would rip it out of the newspaper and then I would actually thumbtack it to my wall growing up. So if you walked into my bedroom as a kid, there would just be Sens stats and player essentially player headshots and all that kind of stuff all along the walls with Sens flags draped everywhere. Nice. And so I was that guy growing up where if you had any questions about, hey, this, who's that player? What are their stats? I could tell you that because I was just so ingrained in what was going on with the Senators and their stats and their player bios. And I think it was the Sun actually had essentially blown up hockey cards in the weekly or whatever in their newspaper. And I would take those out and on the backside, it would have all their stats and stuff like that. So I could tell you, I used to watch games with my mom and my sister, and they would ask me who's that player? And oh, that's this player. These are their stats. I just knew everything. And growing up, my mom was always I don't know what to get Chris for his birthday, or what should I get him for Christmas or whatever. And it's well, I'll just get him something Sens related, and I'm sure he'll be happy with that. And I always was. I was the guy who also had the Sens window flag as well. So it's just been really since probably late 90s, I would say, as they were kind of going on the upswing, and I was getting old enough that I actually I could actually watch the games and understand what was happening. So it's been a long time.
So if you're driving around the market, you see someone with 4 Sens flags hanging out of their car. That's just Chris showing off his old Christmas gift.
Just flexing.
From being a kid. So you mentioned late 90s. That's kind of the rise of Daniel Alfredson. And when this team started being a consistent playoff contender, who are some of the immediate names that come to mind when you think of those early years of becoming a fan?
The big one has always been Mike Fisher. So I was a huge Mike Fisher fan. Also because Mike Fisher, I'm from Lanark, he's from Peterborough. So the distance between the two of us, it felt like I could actually, I almost knew the guy because I've driven through his hometown and all that sort of stuff. So he was always a player that, and just his playing style, I just loved, he came out there and he was heart and soul kind of guy right from the start. Just so good. And so he's the one that I followed the most. And I still remember when he got traded, how much I knew it was going to happen, but how disappointed I was that it actually happened. I obviously appreciated, I'm glad that he went somewhere that actually worked well for him. So that was kind of a silver lining. But yeah, I was Mike Fisher was a big one for me. Also Hossa, even when he got traded, that I remember I was super stoked. I was oh, they re-signed him. This is great. I was next minute, it was actually just a sign and trade and he was gone. And they were bringing in Heatley. And I was now I'm equal parts excited and disappointed that he's
kind of bittersweet, eh?
It was a bittersweet moment. Absolutely. Yeah. So those are a couple of the players that really stood out to me. Obviously, Alfie and Phillips and all those guys as well. Volchenkov was, I loved watching him just sacrifice the body every time. You knew that puck wasn't going through. The goalie probably didn't have to make the save because Volchenkov may as well have just been the goaltender. So yeah, those are a couple of the names that stand out to me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Those are some all-time nostalgia Sens names. Now, it sounds like you've been in the Ottawa area your whole life. So what are some early memories of going to games you had, or times at the rink?
Yeah, so I think the first game I went to was actually with my sister-in-law. She snagged us some like 100 level tickets.
Nice.
It was Ottawa, Tampa Bay. And like that was when Tampa Bay was not what Tampa Bay is now. I don't remember the final score, but I remember actually that's the first and only time I actually like wrote a sign that I held up during the game.
Yeah.
Like "Go Sens Go" probably, or something like that. But that's the earliest memory I have of going to a Sens game. And then usually, fortunately enough, I've been in Ottawa the past, I don't know, 15 years or something like that. So every year I try to go to at least one game. This past season was certainly a lot more than that. But yeah, the first memory I have is Tampa Bay. I think we were right, like it was like 4 rows back or something like that. We spent the night in Ottawa. I don't know, probably like 12 or something like that. But it was such an incredible experience for me. Yeah.
I mean, you're hammering home a point that I hope the Sens are listening to, where you have to get those grassroots programs intact because you make fans for life. I'm kind of a similar story. So when you get them at a young age, when everything is just so big and, you sit 4 rows back, you're like, what am I watching? This is a whole different sport than what you see on TV. So I think that's super important. Now, from the first to the most exciting, when someone, and one day, I know it makes me sad too, the CTC will no longer be there. As of this day, what's the best memory you have inside that building?
Okay, so I think it was not necessarily specific to that spot, but the
I was thinking you were gonna say a concert or something. Like,
no, I did go to see Nickelback there, but we didn't have to get into that.
Noodles would love that.
I would say it was when you boys came to town. That back in February, like it was the whole. It wasn't just about that moment, like in the game. Obviously, it didn't go the way anyone wanted it to, which really sucked a lot. But it was the whole like lead up to it. So it's especially with the CTC, right? Like you're basically just going to a game and then going home. So it's not really about it's not really like Lansdowne or something like that, when you're going to go and you can go all day and, grab a bite to eat and then all this sort of stuff. You're literally just going for the game. So that's why I think that one of the biggest and best memories I had was when, we all met up before the game. Yep. We all hung out, shout out GLEBE Central Pub. Yep, there it is. And yeah, we hung out, got to meet a bunch of people, and then we all went there together. And we all hung out together, and then we all got to come back together. I think like that's what I think when we talk about what it would look like moving forward and what the next chapter looks like, it's all about that to me, because that's what will always stand out to me. As much as like the other experiences and their wins and all those sorts of things are cool, and you go with friends or whatever, it's about like that giant community that really, really resonates with me, and something that like I will never forget that kind of experience. So that's kind of what stands out for me.
I love it.
Yeah, wow, that's flattering, because that was a great time for us too. Ross and I weren't sure if we could pull it off in our first live show, and to have people like you that support the show there, and knowing that it was a good time for everyone was incredible. And that's the thing, like I think that's such a big part of why a downtown arena is so important, is because it's not like, and hey, we love the CTC here, but it is a pain. You're getting out there with all the traffic, you're leaving with all the traffic, and by the time you get back to the city, you're kind of pooped, and you're just like, well, I kind of just want to go home now. So if you can get it where groups and communities can be going to these games together, hanging out at the bars in the area first, then going to the game, then come back, hanging out in the area after, I think it's going to have a big boost, and it's going to create a big impact. Are you fully set on if and when there is a new arena, it being in LeBreton Flats, or are you kind of intrigued by some of these other areas that have been proposed for a new arena?
Yeah, I think so. First of all, I absolutely I echo what you're saying. I think that that community, and just being able to not have to, I remember one of the last times I went to a game, it took me 45 minutes to get out of that parking lot. And at that point, like you said, I just want to go home. I don't really want to go anywhere and hang out with anyone after that. so that sense of community absolutely is important. I for the longest time, I was like LeBreton or bust. Now I'm kind of seeing the value of Bayview, which is literally like, it's like a 2-minute walk up the street. So there's really no difference to the location.
Right.
But I think just the I just drove past it the other day. I was like, this just makes way more sense. It looks much better. So I'm more on Team Bayview than I am on Team LeBreton. Although really, like, either way, as long as it's one of those two locations, I'm like a 20-25 minute walk from there. So it means, like, regardless of whatever kind of bar scene there is there, you can always just like right downtown, and then you can just walk there. Is such a different experience than having to be like, okay, great, so the game starts at what time? Okay, now I have to leave at this time to make sure that I can get there and get through all the different barriers to a parking spot and all that sort of stuff. So that, again, just to echo what you said, like that sense of community, I think, is going to be right there when we're downtown. But Bayview is, I should get a T-shirt that says Team Bayview is really what I'm saying.
Well, yeah, and also, I mean, have a nice bite to eat at Preston Street beforehand.
Yeah.
Well. So it would almost connect Preston in that area with the market or the downtown kind of core. SOPA, are people still trying to make that happen? South Parliament, that's ridiculous. Neither here nor there. I want to get your takes on the Sens today, Chris, because we put up a poll on Instagram. He stay or he go with DJ Smith, and I noticed you were quick to say he gone. Who would you like to see as the next Sens head coach?
Yeah, it's funny because this has been something, that's come up on, TSN 1200 a ton or whatever, around the fact that DJ was exactly, and I think, Pilsy, you said the same thing as well, where DJ was exactly what the team needed to get us to this point. Now, I think, I was quick to say, get rid of him, he gone. But I was like, okay, maybe not quite that quickly, short leash. But I would say I don't know that he's the right person to be able to identify how to be a successful team. But he was a great mentor, and he really did help the youth kind of grow and develop. And I think that's exactly what we needed. And I'm confident in saying we wouldn't be where we are now if it weren't for him. Yep. But is he the right one moving forward? I don't think so. Like, you could see it last year where the team was actually pretty useful. Before then, they were not. Yeah. But last year it was like they actually took big strides, and you could see, if I see Dylan Gambrell in the lineup one more time, so help me. Every time I saw him in the lineup, I was like, dude, get out of here. And it's like that. It's that little piece where he can see that the team's doing really well, but he relies on those other players that he's become so comfortable with. Where it's like, dude, like, you don't need Dylan. Put Gauthier in there, please. Yeah. Those sorts of players where it's like, just challenge yourself, push yourself to look at things a little bit differently. And that's the piece where I think, if you had him in like an associate coach position, I think he would do really well because he'd start to learn different systems. But as a head coach, I don't think he's the right one for this team. And that's regardless of the fact that the team, obviously the players shared that, like, they love him and they all that sort of stuff. And that's great. But you're not there to be everyone's best friend. You're there to challenge them and push them. And I don't think that DJ is that coach. Now, in terms of who I would have in that spot, that's a fantastic question. I'd love your input on maybe some of your ideas. No one immediately strikes me. I know that there was talk of like, a Laviolette or something like that, but I want to have somebody a little bit, experienced, but not someone who's been in the league for as long as like a Babcock or a Laviolette, who's kind of set in their ways. Because I think especially with this youth core, you need somebody who can actually speak to them, support them. And that's where I kind of wonder, like, someone old school like that, are they really going to be able, like, they're set in their ways. They're not going to change. So I'd love to have somebody a little bit younger with a little bit more experience, maybe a coach from, maybe AHL, who's put in his, his time and those sorts of things. But yeah, throw it back at you guys. What are your thoughts on that?
Hope you're enjoying our chat with Chris Sinclair. We'll get right back to it. But first, a word from our friends at Bird Dogs.
I love Bird Dogs, Ross. I went on a nice hike the other day and I was wearing my Bird Dogs because they're great for all sorts of situations. And I love the designs. I love the fit. And the best part about them is they have that built-in liner. So it's very comfortable to wear no matter if it's a hot day, you're on the golf course, you're having some drinks on the patio with friends, whatever it is, Bird Dogs are perfect. They got the fit, they got the comfort, and the versatility to be worn wherever you go. Bert Kreischer loves wearing them at his lake house. Dave Portnoy does his pizza reviews with his Bird Dog shorts on. And PFT from Pardon My Take, he never wears pants because he's found the perfect pair of shorts with Bird Dogs. So go to birddogs.com.
I was just going to say, Pillsy, I heard pizza, and I was just about to say I actually spilled some pizza sauce on my Bird Dogs the other day, and it washed right out. So great fabric. Great Bird Dogs. Where do they go to get them?
Well, you got to go to birddogs.com, and maybe you're at Shawarma Palace and you get some of that extra garlic sauce in your shorts. No worries. Sounds like you can get that right out. But you can go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL and enter promo code LockedOnNHL, and they're going to throw in a free custom Bird Dogs Yeti-style tumbler with every order. So if you want the best pants, you want the best shorts, go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL.
All right, now back to our conversation with this week's SensCentral citizen. Here's Chris Sinclair. Pillsy, how about Troy Mann?
It's funny. I was going to say that, but I was like, it might be too soon.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still a Troy Mann guy.
This is still a Troy Mann podcast.
Yes, exactly. The details of what happened there have not been fully released, so I'll rest my case there. Yeah. But I do think that this team needs a coach that is able to allow the personalities to shine, which I think DJ Smith did do, but also it can't be the fun uncle anymore, I think. And that's the DJ thing, right? Is he's the fun uncle. He's going to keep everything light. He's going to support everybody. He's always going to have his team's back. He's players coach. And I think that's great. But I think eventually there's going to have to be some accountability put in here. And that's not to say DJ didn't do that, but I think more accountability and maybe some better X's and O's applied, because the roster is here as far as I'm concerned, and there's no excuse not to be making the playoffs this season.
Zero excuse. You can't have any excuses. I don't care who's injured, who's out. It's who's here and how they're going to step up. So is there one player that you're targeting this summer, Chris, that you want to see brought in, whether it's a free agent or a guy who could be on the trade market?
So I think the priority needs to be, and this is great that we don't have to talk about defense. You guys have mentioned, it's like, how long has it been where we don't have to talk about the defense really sucking? Now it's like we might not have enough spots for really good defensemen, and I love that. I think the biggest area is it has to be goaltending. I love Forsberg, and he's done so much for this team. For me, I'm obviously a little bit concerned where you have 2 knee injuries. You got to push off off the posts and stuff like that. That's going to grind on you. And I've always been someone who's, he's a solid like 1A, 1B. And I'm definitely reiterating what you guys have already said. So I know this kind of sounds like a broken record, but I absolutely agree with that. I think someone, it'd be great to have like a Saros or something like that, where like, let's, we want to win. We're ready to win. This is our window. Let's spend that money and get that top tier goaltender. I think it was last night I tweeted out just around like Tristan Jarry. I wonder what that might look like for the team. Obviously, it's a bit of a difference between having to trade for a player as opposed to sign free agency. I would say we're in a position where we're really solid with defense. Like, let's leverage some of those picks, some of those players, and get that top tier goaltender. I definitely would love to see Hellebuck come here. Yeah. My only concern is just obviously, we kind of went down this road with DeBrincat where doesn't have much term on his contract. So that would be something that would worry me a little bit. But I think, any player that comes in here, let's be honest, like not only is the team really good, but there's an excitement around what's next. What's this next chapter going to look like? What would it look like to be playing in front of a crowd at like a Lansdowne 2.0 here in Ottawa, right? So that's something that really excites me. And that's something where I think you might be able to convince a Connor Hellebuck or someone of that sort of echelon to be able to come in here and say, you know what, like, sure, I'm only coming in for 1 year, but it's probably going to be a little bit longer because I can see myself fitting in here really well. So those are a couple of names that come to mind, top of mind.
Well, I think that's the perfect example of how Claude Giroux came to Ottawa, right? Like, yes, hometown guy, he was building a house here already, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't think Claude Giroux is signing a 3-year deal in Ottawa if he doesn't see excitement and see the potential and see the growth, right? So I think if a guy like Claude Giroux is willing to do it, you could talk other guys into doing it. Now, you mentioned Alex DeBrincat in your little rant there, so we got to go to that because I don't think you can start to consider finding a number one goalie until you figured out what the salary cap is going to look like in regards to DeBrincat. So, Chris, where do you stand on DeBrincat in all forms? Do you just give him the 1 year? Do you sign him long term? Do you trade him? Where are you at?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the immediate reaction for a lot of people is, you know what, let's just trade him. You know, maybe that gives us a couple of first round picks or like at least a second round pick, ideally in this next draft. And that's going to be great. And I think that's important. I don't care about draft picks. I don't want draft picks.
Picks are for losers.
Yeah, exactly. And trust me, we've gone through that, right? So we're done. We're done. So no draft picks. I don't care that we're drafting in the 4th round. I don't care. It doesn't bother me. What I would say is this, is that if you can, I think he saw what this team can be. And obviously it took some time for him to feel comfortable. And I think, you know, let's be honest, none of us thought that he would be playing with Pinto, you know, basically the entire year, right? Like if you stick him with Norris, that's an entirely different player. You know, DeBrincat was also relied upon to play more defense. And that's not something that wasn't necessarily part of his repertoire. He was really here to just score goals. And if you have a top line, it's crazy to think that Norris would be the second line center. But if you have somebody of his stature on the second line, then you're getting fed way better passes. They're more confident passes. They're going to be on your stick. You don't have to work as hard to get to those areas. So I think like that will change. And I would expect DeBrincat to identify that like this wasn't an ideal scenario to come into first, his first year with the team. What I would say is I'm comfortable signing him long term, but then you get into the conversation around someone like Sanderson, where you don't want to dip too far into Sanderson's inevitably large contract. Yep. So I would say if DeBrincat if he's willing to sign long term for, say, and I might be lowballing a little bit here because I'm hopeful, but like a $7.5 million, $8 million a year, I think that would be somewhere that I would feel more comfortable, aligning myself with, rather than $9 million, $9.5 million, because then there's just not going to be enough for top defensemen and stuff like that. And obviously, in a couple of years, someone like Chychrun is going to want to re-sign, and I would expect him to re-sign here. But you start to kind of get too far into the other priorities that you have, and Sanderson has to be at the top of that list as well. So I would say, 7.5 would be where I'd want to go long term, especially because then he gets that stability. So I would hope that the stability would outweigh, maybe taking $1.5 million less than he would get in free agency.
Now with Alex DeBrincat, you got to make a decision for him, whether he wants to come back and go from there. But I like that you finally get to spend to the cap, and then you have it all locked up in a few players. That kind of seems counterproductive. But
it's wild though to think that we're like, how many years? 2 years ago, we were not anywhere near the cap, and now we're worried about like cap responsibility and how are we going to piece all of these or put all these pieces together. That's a wild thing that I never, we've been so far away from that over the years that it's wild to think that that's now something that we actually have to say, like, we might not be able to sign him. We may have to trade him because we just don't have enough cap space.
Yeah, that's a part of the show's growth as well, because we used to just be like, oh, we like him? Yeah, bring him in. We got all the room. We can have everybody. And now it's like, hey, we have to be a little bit more picky and choosy. And you hope that kind of elevates the standard with the guys in the room too, knowing that, it's time to elevate everything around the organization. Recently, we elevated our show. And final question for me, I want to hear about Owl & Co. Grooming. Like, where did you get the idea to start it? How did the process go to get it to where it is now? And what's next for it?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it's important for everyone to know, like, I've mentioned this before, but you guys have been like super supportive right from the start. So there it is. And that's been invaluable to me, sort of that credibility from you guys, especially as a Sens fan, especially as someone who wants to be, the brand to be kind of synonymous with the Sens community. That was something that was really important to me. So you guys just like diving in and being so receptive, I think is something I don't want to neglect or forget to mention. Really, and I'm going to try not to go into the weeds too much here, but over the years, I'm that kind of guy who's driven and wants to do his own thing and wants to, get his own thing out there and create something that can, to varying degrees, like inspire someone or help them feel fulfilled or whatever that case may be. And so over the years, most recently, like the last probably 6 or 10 years or so, I started a couple of clothing companies, and that just didn't really resonate with me. And then this sort of Owl & Co. really was an organic thing where I was looking and I was like, I need new hair product. I was like, this is so expensive. Why does this need to be so expensive? And I was like, well, why don't I just make my own? And then I made my own. And then people started saying like, whoa, dude, what are you wearing? What is this scent? All that sort of stuff. And then from there, it was, giving out samples and then people just coming back and saying, Chris, like this, I'm not going to anyone else. I don't want to get another product. It's obviously local and, I know these people and they know me and obviously they want to be supportive of me. And then from there, I was just like, well, I mean, I don't really want to just keep giving out samples. Like this might be something that could turn into something bigger. And I think it's that people see that I'm just being authentic. This is me. I love beard products. I love, I've been cutting my hair since I was 13. All that sort of stuff is just like they feel that I care about this stuff. It's not just some dude making some stuff that he doesn't care about. I can talk to you, again, not to go into the weeds, but I can talk to you about the various ingredients and all that sort of stuff that go into these products, why I chose those things. There's an intention behind it, and it's because I care about it. And I've used all of these products. I used them before I gave them to anyone else so that I can make sure that it was the right stuff and it would make a difference and it would make things easier. And then, from there, the logo itself was actually designed by my tattoo artist. And so there's like that connection there where it's, I didn't just find a random owl online and stick it in a circle and call it a day, right? Like I actually worked with someone to help create this. Shout out to Christian for that. Definitely check him out at Waxwing Studios in Almont, Ontario. He's a great guy. Big shout out to him. And just like, it's just that creating something that just resonates with you. Everyone around you kind of picks up on that. And I think that you guys probably have felt that on your end. And I again, just really appreciate that. As of, what's next for me, I work a full-time job. I'd love for this to be my full-time job and to be able to be connecting with the Sens community, to be reaching out to people, to be able to, again, create that connection between the Sens community and what Owl & Co. grooming really is. It just, that's me. And that's something that's important to me. And so I'd love to be able to take this to the next level. Someone like Jamie on Twitter, he and I working together on the new merch and stuff like that. That's something that's really, really an awesome experience for me as well. So continuing with that sort of stuff, that's where I really want to see it. So this becoming my full-time job would be the next step for me.
Well, let's work towards that together. And if anyone doesn't know where to find it, it's owlandcogrooming.com. SensCentral.com. Chris, appreciate you being a SensCentral citizen, man. It's been great seeing you out at all the events this year, and we're already looking forward to the home opener next year. So thanks for doing this. We'll do it again down the road, and thanks for being such a great part of the community and a great part of this show.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Really appreciate you having me on, taking the time with me. Really love this conversation. Can't wait for what's coming next.
Stick taps to Chris for joining us. Really fun conversation, and I'm glad we could pull back the curtain and show you the origin of Owl & Co. Grooming. So very fun conversation there. Go follow him on Twitter as well. Always mention that, right? Chris Sinclair. You can find him there through us at SensCentral. All right, Pillsy, any final thoughts on today's show?
Final thoughts for me, Ross, is the playoffs are still going on, and both conference final series, there's a 3-0 lead for the Florida Panthers and the Vegas Golden Knights. I mean, you think we're getting double sweeps here, or what's your feeling on these series?
I think that the hockey gods realized maybe these weren't the most intriguing matchups and said, let's just get them over with. They've been good hockey. Like I'm not chirping the game, but maybe like storylines wise, at least for us here in Ottawa, we're like, you know what? It's okay. But the games have been awesome. 3-0 though. I'm going to say one team at least gets a courtesy win here coming up. But my goodness, if it is a sweep in both, I don't know if that's A, ever happened before, and B, these are going to be two teams riding very high going into the finals. Florida, Vegas, sign me up for this one. Brady Tkachuk is going to have his head on a swivel. His kind of mentor in Mark Stone against his brother. I mean, who's he going to cheer for? Is he going to have one of those halfy jerseys?
I hope not. Other than parents, no one else should have those. I think Carolina gets one win done. I think they'll win tonight, and that Dallas team is in shambles. I mean, Jake Ottinger, I think it was 3 goals and 5 shots. They were throwing beer cans and food on the ice. I'd never seen this before, Ross. There's 20 seconds left in the period. The refs just said, we're not playing. Everybody go to the room. Period's over. For playoff hockey, like, it was getting out of control there. So I just think Dallas, they've shot themselves in the foot, and they can't get out of their own way here. So I think Vegas is going to have the clean sweep.
They weren't only throwing on the ice, they were throwing it at the goalie.
Yeah, popcorn. Yeah. Although, did you see his press conference after? He's like, yeah, everything was hitting me tonight.
that's I love it. That's some confidence that you need from a guy who, was the 4th string goalie at the start of the year? If, I guess, they knew Robin Lehner was going to miss the year with surgery, but it would have been Lehner, then Thompson, then Brossoit, and then they brought in Aiden Hill.
And Quick. Quick's there.
Well, Quick's still up in the press box, so he's higher than him on the depth chart. But even still, it just shows you the kind of depth you need in the Stanley Cup playoffs. My final thoughts on today's show, though, Pillsy, we've decided June is NHL draft month. So we're going to hold off on the NHL draft talk. We're going to figure out the sale of the Ottawa Senators, react to that, try to get some voices on who either know the owners or who are associated with them in some way or another. And we'll go from there, but June will be NHL draft month. We've got our list of top 90, and by top 90, we've actually kind of sprinkled in a few later round picks because we want to hopefully nail at least one Sens pick, but draft month is June, so get ready for that. I know people enjoy, even when it's not the Senators, hey, there could be a deal in the future where one of these guys comes to Ottawa and we'll post each one of these individually. So whenever that name comes to the forefront, you can go check that out on our YouTube channel, Locked On Senators.
Absolutely stoked to get into some draft prospect profiles.
All right, but for today, we say goodbye. Again, thanks to Chris Sinclair for joining us. Thanks to Owl & Co. for being a great sponsor of the show. Tomorrow or Friday, we should have an answer to the age-old question, Pillsy. By age-old, I mean it is aging me. I'm old now since the Senators have gone for sale. But for today, we say goodbye. For Brandon Pillar, I'm Ross Levitan. This has been the Locked On Senators podcast, your team every day.